Hi everyone, welcome to my Admitted Students Day lecture. My name is Dr. Jenna Scisco. I'm an assistant professor of psychological science here at Eastern Connecticut State University, and I'm so excited to be able to give this presentation to you, even though it is from my home office as we practice social distancing. I look forward to telling you a bit about the psychology major and also just giving you a bit of a taste of what a lecture would be like here at Eastern. And some of the material that I have today is taken from the lectures that I give in my Psychology 100 general psychology course that a lot of students take to meet their liberal art requirement. So first, I just wanted to say congratulations on your admission to Eastern. It's an excellent school. I've been teaching here for 6 years now, and it's really my greatest joy in life is to be able to teach here at Eastern, and I think that you will truly enjoy your experience when you choose to attend. So just a little bit about me and my background and what I do at Eastern. I'll start with my background. When I went to college, I grew up in New Jersey. So I went to the College of New Jersey, which is New Jersey's public liberal arts institution. So its mission is very similar to Eastern's mission, and it had a really similar number of students, about 5,000 students at the time that I attended. And so I really enjoyed my time as an undergraduate student, and I started out actually as a biology major, thought I was going to go to medical school, and then I changed my mind. I realized I really was passionate about psychology, and that ultimately I was hoping I could become a psychology professor. I wasn't sure how that was going to work out, though, when I was a student. So I completed a major in psychology at the College of New Jersey, and then I went to graduate school at Clemson University, which is located in South Carolina. Go Tigers! At Clemson, I got my master's in applied psychology, and then I earned a PhD in human factor psychology, which is the study of how humans interact with technology and systems in order to improve human performance. So I graduated from Clemson 8 years ago now, and after I graduated, I had a really cool opportunity to work for the Army, and I worked for their military nutrition division because I do some research on eating behavior. So I worked for the Military Nutrition Division in Natick, Massachusetts for 2 years, doing research on how to get Army soldiers basically to eat their fruits and vegetables, and also some research determining what happens when Army soldiers who are out in the field, for example, during wartime, have restricted calorie intake and how that might impact them in terms of how their body responds, but also mentally, how they respond to that restricted calorie intake, as well as elevated physical activity. So it was a really interesting job where I got additional research experience. And then I started at Eastern in August of 2014, and I've been teaching in the psychology department ever since, and I teach a number of different courses. I focus a lot on our research methods courses. If you're a psychology major, you learn a lot about research in psychology, so I teach research methods. I also teach our statistics course. I teach general psychology to a number of first-year students. I also teach physiological psychology, which is the study of the relationship between the brain and the body and behavior. I've also had the opportunity to teach some global field courses, and if you look at the right side of this slide, you'll see a picture from one of the global field courses that I taught in Dublin, Ireland in the summer of 2016, and I've done this 3 times. First, I took students to London, England for 4 weeks in the summer, and we studied the history of psychology, and then the following summer, I took students to Dublin, Ireland, also to study the history of psychology. Just last summer, I took Eastern students to Florence, Italy for 3 weeks, and we studied the cross-cultural psychology of food and eating behavior. And it was such a wonderful opportunity, all 3 of these courses. It's something that once travel resumes around the world, something that we look forward to continuing to offer as a department. In fact, we have a global field course that's currently being planned for Brazil in summer 2021. And so that is just one example of one of the really interesting opportunities that we have here in our psychology major. Also at Eastern, I do research with undergraduate students. This is a wonderful opportunity for anyone who's thinking that they might want to go to graduate school or just work in research eventually in some way. And so on the left side of the slide here, I have a picture of me with my research team. I run a health and human performance laboratory. We've done a number of different studies at Eastern, including studies of rude behavior in the workplace and how that impacts work performance, also eating behavior, and how that can impact a variety of things in our lives. And my most recent study that I'm currently planning is looking at the effect of an active workstation on how employees feel during the day and also how they perform their work. And an active workstation is something like walking on a treadmill while you're working, something that might be becoming even more popular as more people choose or have to work from home. So that's a little bit about me, what I teach, and the research that I do, and some of the special opportunities that I offer students. And so now I'm going to transition into what would normally be a lecture with all of you, and my lectures are always really interactive. And so as you're watching this from home, I encourage you to pause this video if you can when I ask you questions and think about them and try to answer them, and feel free to answer them out loud. And so the first one is, when you hear the word psychology, what do you think of? So feel free to pause the video for a moment and think about it. What do you think of when you hear the word psychology? So now that you've had a moment to think about that question, you might have said something like the brain. You might think about the study of the brain, and that's definitely an important area of psychology, understanding our brain. A lot of people describe the brain as the window to the mind. So we can do studies with, for example, fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging technology. We can learn more about areas of the brain that are active and understand how that's related to our behaviors. You also might have referenced some popular psychology stuff, like you might have said, oh, I think of Dr. Phil when I think of psychology. And so Dr. Phil is a popular example of someone who's a clinical psychologist, but you might be interested in understanding how we can use psychology to help others. You may have also mentioned historical figures from psychology, like Freud, or you might have described something like psychotherapy, laying down on a couch and talking about your childhood. And so these are all important examples from the history of psychology, but psychology is actually much broader. We have a number of different areas that go beyond clinical and counseling psychology, including things like developmental psychology, behavior analysis, industrial organizational psychology, which is the study of the workplace and how people feel and how they perform at work. Psychology is a very big area with a lot of subfields. So in addition to what you thought of, there's probably a whole nother world of psychology that you're not even familiar with yet, but you could learn through our major. So our major at Eastern is called the Psychological Science major. We emphasize science in the major, meaning that we make sure that you have a really strong background in understanding and also being able to do psychology research so that any work that you do in the future can be grounded in really solid scientific ideas. I have a link on the slide to our website, and so I highly recommend that you visit the website at Eastern and browse and learn about the major. We have 5 concentrations of study within our major. The first is general psychology, which is a broad program that exposes you to all the different areas of psychology, and anyone can be in that general psychology concentration, and it can prepare you for any future in a career or graduate school related to psychology. We also have 4 specific concentrations if we have students that are interested in pursuing a particular career path, and these concentrations allow you to take courses within that area of interest. So we have developmental psychology, so that can be something that someone might choose if they're going into education, or maybe if they're thinking about being a school psychologist, or maybe working with children, or even working with older adults, so anyone across the lifespan. Industrial organizational psychology is our concentration for individuals who are interested in the psychology of the workplace and who are thinking about maybe working in positions such as human resources. Behavior analysis is a really popular concentration. Anyone who's interested in becoming an applied behavior analyst and potentially working, for example, in the school system with people with developmental disabilities or delays. This is a really rapidly expanding field and a really fantastic concentration that prepares someone to become a certified behavior analyst. And lastly, we have mental health counseling, and mental health counseling is a great concentration for anyone interested in becoming a clinical or counseling psychologist. And our programs, all of our concentrations, have options for students to engage in really high impact opportunities. These are things like our internship program. So we have a really fantastic internship program. You actually earn credit towards your degree here at Eastern by completing an internship in the community. This is required in the mental health counseling concentration and an option within the other concentrations. We also have research assistantships where you can do research with a faculty member. So as I mentioned before, that could be like doing research with me in my health and human performance lab. Something that is very, very exciting is that in Goddard Hall on campus, we have brand new research space. It's just been newly renovated. We're just starting to use it this year. It's beautiful. We have a number of individual suites where faculty do their research and the students get to conduct research in these spaces. It is really wonderful. And so I do recommend that when campus does reopen, that if you can get a campus tour, check out Goddard Hall and all the beautiful renovations in there, and try to take a peek into the psychology research labs. We also offer teaching assistantships. So for students who have done well in a course, a professor can invite you to be a teaching assistant or a TA. And a TA can help teach the class, can help with assessing student work. It's a really wonderful experience if you're thinking about going to teaching in the future, or just getting a really unique experience working closely with a faculty member, which can be really helpful for things like letters of recommendation in the future. As I mentioned, we have our global field courses where you earn credit towards your degree by traveling and learning around the world. We also have Psy-Chi, which is the International Honor Society in Psychology. You can be inducted into the society if you meet the requirements based on your performance here at Eastern, and a wonderful honor to have on your resumes. And finally, we have Psychology Club, where any student interested in psychology can get together for weekly meetings, learn more about psychology, and it also just serves as a wonderful social group for our students. As an example of one of their activities, Psychology Club participated in a walk for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention back in September, and they raised over $800 for that foundation. And so now just to talk a little bit more like we're in a lecture, I'd like you to now think about what you think the difference is between sensation and perception. So sensation and perception is one of the chapters that we review in the Psychology 100 General Psychology course. It's also an entire course itself. So if you're in the psychology major, you might take our Psy 318 Sensation and Perception class. And so I have this question for you to ponder. What is the difference between sensation and perception? So you can pause the video, think about what your answer is. And so hopefully what you determined is that sensation is actually what we are, and I'm trying not to use the same words over and over again, but sensation is actually receiving information through our sense organs. So our eyes' ability to detect light and see images, and our ears' ability to bring in sound. Basically the ability of our body to take signals from outside of our body, light waves, vibrations, the sensation of touch, and actually turning that into a neurological signal that our brain can interpret. That's what sensation is all about. Then perception is what our brain actually puts together so that we can perceive. What we actually see is our perception, or what we actually hear is our perception. And so my next question is, do we always perceive reality, and why or why not? And to help you answer this question, I'd like you to follow this link on the slide. Feel free to type that into YouTube. You could also just search YouTube for the McGurk Effect, and you're looking for the video where there is a roller coaster in the beginning, and then you're going to be able to watch the McGurk Effect. So I'd like you to watch this video about the McGurk Effect, and then I would like you to answer this question. Do we always perceive reality? Why or why not? So I'll let you pause the video at this point. And now that you've had a chance to watch the video, you should come to the conclusion that we don't always perceive reality, right? Because so what we're seeing in the McGurk Effect is that what we see can sometimes be different from what we hear. And there's a mismatch because our brain wants to use that visual information over the auditory information. And that's what creates this really reliable McGurk Effect. This McGurk Effect is something I've actually recreated in class. In my Psy 100 class, I'll have students stand in front of the class and have them mouth different syllables while I say something. And it's really interesting to see that it kind of works in person too. And it always works. And even every time I watch the video, it still works for me, even though I know all about why it happens. So that's a very interesting example of not perceiving reality. I have a couple of additional links for you to follow, so feel free to copy these down and try these activities at home. Do you have color deficient vision? This is a topic that we talk about in Psy 100 and that you would also learn about in Sensation and Perception, and actually even in our physiological psychology course. And so this is a fun test to do at home to see if you can actually detect all of the numbers in colored circles, or if that is difficult for you. So you should give that a try at home. Also, I recommend trying the Hi, How Can You Hear test. And so this test is testing for if you have any hearing loss. It's really interesting to try this one out with your parents or any older adults that you might live with. Give this a try. You can see what can you hear and what can they hear. And what always happens in class, I'm not that old yet, but what always happens in class is that all of the students who are younger than me, usually younger than me, can actually hear higher frequencies than me. And so we usually in class will talk about, why is that happening? And that's happening because your high frequency hearing is the part that's damaged first. So I've had a lot of experiences in my life already that could have damaged my high frequency hearing. I've done a lot of commuting. Maybe I've gone to a lot of loud concerts. Maybe I've had my children screaming in my ear. And all of these things could have damaged my high frequency hearing. Whereas if you're younger, you may not have experienced that much damage yet. So that's why we see the difference. So check those out. Give those tests a try. Figure out, do you have color deficient vision? And are you able to hear the full spectrum of sound being played on that website? So as another example of kind of the difference between what we see in reality, these figures demonstrate a figure-ground relationship. So take a look at this image and think about what you see and maybe say out loud what you see. So the first thing I see is a man playing a saxophone. So if you see the man playing the saxophone, that's great. And so now I'm going to also say that I see a face, a woman's face. So if you're looking for the woman's face, these are the eyes, this is the nose, this is the mouth, and here is the man playing the saxophone. And this is demonstrating a figure-ground relationship. We can mentally decide, we can use our cognitive control to say either the black part of the image is the background, and when we say that to ourselves and we try to then kind of almost like manipulate the object through vision, then that white part jumps out and we can see the face. If we say that the white is the background and then we look at the image, then the man playing the saxophone really jumps out. So here's his nose right in the saxophone. So we're able to see that when we decide what is the figure and what is the background. Here's another classic example of a figure-ground relationship. What do you see in this image? And you probably guessed by now there should be two things that you see. If you think the black is the background, you'll see the white vase. And if you think the white is the background, you will see two faces facing each other. These are their noses and mouths. And here's another image for you to think about what you see. In this case, the first thing that I usually see is the young woman. She has her head turned to the side. This is her ear. This is her eyelashes. This is her jawline and a necklace and lots of hair. But if I say there's also an old woman, then this changes, right? We see two eyes, a large nose, lips, and a large chin. So we're using different elements of the image there to kind of change what the figure and the ground are. Here's another illusion to think about the difference between perception and reality. This is called the Müller-Lyer Illusion. And in this illusion I ask, if you look at these two lines, which line below is longer? So take a moment to decide. You may say, and what most people will say, people in our culture will say, is that the bottom line is longer. However, in reality, they are the same distance apart. They're the same length. And this is because we have grown up in environments that have a lot of right angles, houses or apartments, right? So we have all these right angles. It has tricked our visual system into thinking about when we look at these intersections between lines, it helps us to judge distance. And so it allows us to see that bottom line is longer when in reality it is the same length. This illusion doesn't work as well in cultures where people have not grown up in houses with 90-degree angles, which I think is really interesting. So that gives a little bit of insight into how our neurodevelopment and perceptions are actually related to our experiences in childhood. So I'd like to also talk just a little bit about some of the research that I have done in the past and how that's related to this topic. Our understanding of sensations and perceptions can be used by psychologists to improve human performance and health. And so here's an example on the slide. This is a classic illusion in eating behavior research. Which plate contains the most food? Well, it tends to look like perhaps the right plate, all the way on the right here, contains the most food. But actually it's the same amount of food, as you may have already guessed. So what's really interesting is that when we have small plates and we put food on them, we think, oh, look at that, I have a lot of food. Maybe I feel like I have enough food to eat. As plates get larger, food starts to look smaller. So what do you think we do? Yes, we start adding more food to the plate, right? What's really interesting is that over time, there have been some studies that have looked at changes in plate size. Since the 1950s, plate sizes have been increasing. And when we serve ourselves food onto larger plates, we're more likely to eat more of that food. There's also some interesting research showing that if we pour something into a glass, and we're using a tall glass versus a short glass, this is something that a bartender might do, or a server may do, or you may even just do in your own kitchen, right? If you pour something into a tall glass, it looks like more. It looks like more because it's taller, so we tend to pour a little bit less than if we're pouring a liquid into a wider glass. So another interesting way that perception impacts how much we're pouring and ultimately consuming. So some research that I've done specifically is I wondered if you took more or smaller bites of a serving, how would that affect your perception of the food? And the reason why I wondered this is because when I was a graduate student, I did some really novel research designing a device. At the time, we called it the bite counter. Eventually, it was called the ELM watch, the Eat Less, Move More watch. But what this watch was able to do was count the number of wrist rotations that you made to your mouth. So when you're eating and you're bringing food to your mouth, you actually have to rotate your wrist towards your mouth. So imagine you're bringing a sandwich to your mouth or like an apple to your mouth, and that wrist rotation is actually indicative of you taking a bite. So this watch was able to measure those bites. And so I kind of wondered, well, if you were taking more bites of something and they were smaller, how would that actually affect your perception of the food? And I had some really great students working with me at the time. We had to figure out, well, what kind of food could you cut up into these like reliably, equivalently sized bites? And they ultimately decided that Jell-O would probably be the easiest thing to manipulate. So our participants ate Jell-O, and my research assistants spent a lot of time with Jell-O. And what we did was we took this Jell-O and we divided it into either 9 or 16 pieces. And in one study, we asked people to just take a look at these pictures and tell us which one had more Jell-O. And as you might imagine, it was actually the same amount of Jell-O. And what we found in this study with about 40 people is that people were more likely to say that there was more Jell-O in that 16-piece condition compared to the 9-piece condition. They were also a lot more likely to eat more of it. So we had people come in, it was within subject study, they came in on 2 different days. One day they ate 9 pieces, another day they ate 16 pieces, and they were more likely to rate it as being more food when they ate the 16 pieces, even though it was like the exact same amount of food. There were also no differences in how satisfied they were with the Jell-O, how much they liked it, or their hunger or fullness. So that was really interesting to us. It seems like when we combine that with an internet survey where people were reporting that the 16-piece serving was more, it really indicates to us that there's something about the visual quality of the number of pieces of food that's associated with actually thinking that you ate more food, even though you don't actually feel any different. So pretty cool. If you have any questions for me about anything related to psychology, about being an Eastern student, I would be so happy to answer those questions for you. You can send me an email at sciscoj, that's SCISCOJ, at easternct.edu, and I'd be happy to tell you more about our major. And I very much look forward to meeting you next year. Congratulations.